Hello, lovelies. You're listening to episode 76 of the Broken Enchantments podcast, written and read by Elizabeth Wheatley. That's me. I hope you enjoy this week's episode. Be sure to check out my Patreon for next week's episode, now available. You can check out the links below. Happy listening. After she'd been scrubbed by the two handmaidens, Janir felt cleaner and less sore, but still exhausted. She appreciatively devoured a meal brought on a tray, then let the handmaidens dress her in a bright green tunic and matching trousers with a light yellow sash. The clothes were exquisite, befitting a princess. By the time the remains of her meal were taken, the groan of the door hinges startled her from behind. Bolting from beside the low table, she spun around, only to collide with Cyrilius. The Mortong gripped her arms. "Not so fast, girl." Peering around Cyrilius, Janir glimpsed a contingent of Argotolum guards marching into the room ahead of two chained prisoners. "Saoven! Karile!" "Janir! Janir!" they cried, almost in unison. Janir tried to push past Cyrilius, but he restrained her until the door thudded shut, and two guards were posted on either side of the door. Janir had no idea what they thought she and the others would do. They were unarmed against 7 elite honor guards and in the heart of the enemy stronghold. Perhaps it was merely a reminder of who held control. The moment Cyrilius released her, Janir ran to her friends. They had both seen better days, but Karile still had an indomitable swagger, and Saoven still held himself straight as an arrow. Karile and Saoven tried to wrap their arms around her at the same time, and the result was a tangled mess of arms and chains and their 3 bodies strung together like fish on a line. Janir clutched at them both, realizing only now that she hadn't quite believed they were safe. "Janir!" Karile cried. "Thank the Father! I was sure they were planning some unpleasant Argotolum nastiness on us all. They're not, are they?" They were both utterly filthy, and their joint embrace came with the reek of refuse and midden. Janir smelled of jasmine and honeysuckle. That mental note brought a new stab of guilt. Karile abruptly dropped his voice, repeating, "They're not, are they?" Janir shook her head. "Not so long as I do what they want." "Are you all right?" Saoven was looking her over intently. "What happened?" He lightly touched a scratch on her cheek. Bathing might wash away the dirt and grime, but some marks of last night's adventure would take longer to disappear. It was a good thing her tunic covered the carcatan burns on her chest and torso, or else the elf and enchanter might have panicked. "They hurt you." Saoven went rigid and inhaled sharply. Janir shook her head. No, I'm fine, Saoven. Amilla tried to kill me, but you can see she failed. That's all." From the way Saoven clenched her arm, he remembered Amilla all too well. He was still scarred by her handiwork. "What happened?" "My father's taking care of it. That's not important right now." "Not important? Some sadistic she-cur tries to off you, and that's not important." Karile realized a moment later that he had shouted. He hunched his shoulders and dropped his head. Not that it did much good with the 3 of them standing in the middle of the room. "Listen, I need you to hear me." Janir tried to bottle up her tumult of fear, dread, and heartbreak. Guising her emotions was a skill she would need in abundance once they returned to Adasha. "There's something important, and I can't do it after." Janir cut off her words before her voice could crack. "Janir, you cannot go back." Saoven spoke to her, but his eyes were locked on Cyrilius. "You can't go back to him." Janir assumed the elf meant her father, though it was questionable. "He'll kill you all if I don't," she whispered back. I would rather die than see you in his hands again. The words were sharp, vehement. And Karile? Your father? Lord Kyrson, Luana? Lady Gwenna? Would they prefer that too? Janir blinked. She couldn't cry now. She couldn't. Not in front of Cyrilius and the other half-dozen Argotolums, watching them the way foxes watch a partridge nest. Saoven tightened his arm around her waist, as if he could protect her with that one simple act. Janir, there has to be. It must be a very interesting conversation with all that whispering, said one of the honor guards. Janir had seen him once or twice before, but no name sprang to mind. He was built like an inverted pyramid, broad shoulders that rippled with every move and narrow hips. He held a carcatan and thumped it thoughtfully against his other palm, a gesture that put every fiber of Janir's being on guard. He took a slow, deliberate step closer. Perhaps you'd like to share with the rest of us. Cyrilius raised a hand, though he never once took his eyes off Saoven. Let them be. The command was cool as ice, the tone of one who knows he will be obeyed. The hulking Morton slunk back to his post. For some reason, that made Saoven glare all the harder at Cyrilius. Janir lowered her voice until Saoven and Karile had to lean close. Maybe there's another way, she whispered, but I can't find it. Then do what I do, Karile suggested. Make one. Janir often wished she had the enchanter's courage and calm demeanor under threat of death. If anything happened to you two, or the others, I'd never forgive myself. Saoven's shackles left rust stains on her tunic as he tried to pull her just a little closer. Don't sell your soul, he pleaded. Please, Janir. Don't let them make you like... He didn't say it, but he meant them. Something inside her cracked, but she did her best to keep it together. I'm not selling my soul. I'm selling my cooperation. But then, was she? Today, the Lord Argotolum was asking her to return to Adasha. Tomorrow, he might order her to kill someone, torture them. He might have her do the things that had been done to her, things that haunted her nightmares. He might command her to take a man into her bed, for the sake of their bloodline. It made her stomach churn. She had promised to do her best to be what he wanted. Only now did she realize how very inclusive that sweeping oath had been. What if we broke out? Karile piped up. He hadn't given up, and probably saw no reason why they should. How Janir envied his optimism. They keep me here under constant guard. I won't be able to help you. She was a captive as sure as they were. She just had the better accommodations. What if we escaped and then you escaped? She closed her eyes. He said he'd have you hunted down. I am sure he says a good many things. Saoven growled. He found an obscure fondling in Greenhaven. What makes you think he can't find a high lord, a noblewoman, 3 elves, and a garrison commander's son? Janir hated taking this road, but it was the only one left her. Janir, you're giving up too easily. There's got to be... Listen to me, she demanded. It was hard enough without them trying to talk her out of it. Malkalar's helping them. You have to get out of here, and you have to find out why. Saoven's eyes went wide. Karile frowned. Who? Janir discreetly pressed a finger to his lips. Ask Saoven later. Saoven didn't look convinced. Janir, how do you... I saw him and he tried to kill me. He might have just... We cannot discuss this now. When my father releases you, and he's promised he will, you will have to find out what Malkalar's doing and why. Janir, what if the Lord Argotolum makes you forget us again? Karile looked away, hesitantly, showing fear for the first time. Janir bit her lip. She fought to keep her emotions in check at the thought of Chetan Shrai, and worse, not knowing the most important people in her life. "I don't know," she weakly confessed. "Karile, I don't know." Cyrilius abruptly took a step closer. "Visit's over." Janir hadn't thought it possible, but Saoven tensed even more and tried to pull her closer. "2 more minutes?" she pleaded. It was a small hope, but she tried anyway. "You've had quite a few as it is. Come away, princess." Karile reluctantly let her go. That didn't stop him from folding his shackled arms and pouting indignantly. Saoven's mouth hardened into a thin line. The tendons in his neck stood out, and Janir could see him thinking that just maybe... "Don't," she pleaded. She laid a hand over his heart beseechingly. "Please, it's no use." Janir almost had to pry herself out of his arms, but he didn't make any other effort to keep her from Cyrilius. The Morton stepped forward as soon as she was no longer touching Saoven. Cyrilius grasped her arm, almost gently this time, and tugged her out of reach. "Return them to the dungeons," Cyrilius ordered. Janir watched with a dead feeling in her chest as Saoven and Karile were herded back to their underground prison. The door closed after the prisoners, leaving Janir alone with Cyrilius once more, though she was fairly certain there were more guards stationed outside, especially after last night. Cyrilius let go. Janir dropped her arm to her side. "You truly care for him? The elf?" Janir didn't move, though Cyrilius stepped around to face her. Nor did she give an answer, though he clearly expected one. She should worry about Armandius too, and Luana, Gwenna, and Velasquez, and she did, but it was Saoven and Karile's names that echoed in her head. Janir had the sudden urge to knot her fingers together, but she forced them to remain at her sides. "I assume you think me a weakling and a traitor." "You assume too much, my lady." Cyrilius folded his arms and observed her, in an almost casual way. Almost. There was still a certain air of austerity and authority about him that Janir found hard to put into words. Janir didn't know what to make of that. He might be sincere. She thought it more likely he was trying to glean information for her father. She turned away. "What do you want, Cyrilius?" "I want to know what makes the future ruler of my race betray us all for some sylvan bastard." "You want to know? Or the Lord Argatalam does?" "Would you believe me if I said I have never breathed a word of our private conversations to anyone?" Janir considered it a moment. "No." If Cyrilius was offended, he gave no sign. "So what made you do it?" Janir looked up at the rafters. Even her father hadn't pressed her like this. "You love him?" It was an inexpressibly odd question coming from Cyrilius Polivar Argatalam. Her father must have put him up to asking. "Yes," she answered. "You heard me that day in Valmakin, when my father had a carcaton to his throat. I love him." Cyrilius was as unreadable as a marble statue. "Enough to annihilate legions." It wasn't a question. At that came a sharp reminder of the lives she had ended when she attacked the chalice. Their cries and screams still echoed in her nightmares. The vast burial grounds had still been fresh when they left Lares. "Enough to turn on your own people." Cyrilius's voice hardened, and Janir had a feeling he was much, much angrier than he was willing to show. "Yes," she answered. "So you just joined our enemies and threw us to the Brevian army. Are we truly that wretched in your eyes?" "Do you think I wanted to do it?" Janir demanded. "Do you think I even knew about the army?" Janir shook her head. "You wouldn't believe it if I told you what happened. And I don't blame you." Cyrilius shrugged. "Humor me." Janir didn't think for a second he actually trusted a word she said. But after she'd betrayed him, she supposed he had the right to the truth. even if he didn't believe it. She stared emptily at the rainforest beyond the balcony. I just wanted to save Saoven and Lares. I didn't plan or know about anything else, and I never wanted to hurt anyone. A long silence stretched between them. Cyrilius stood at her back, thinking heavens knew what. She didn't expect him to believe her. In his place, she wouldn't have. There are 2 guards outside your door if you need anything. Cyrilius was all business once again as he marched out. Janir watched him go, conflicting emotions vying in her chest. She had chosen Saoven and Karile and the Brevians over them, and she would do it again. But that didn't change that she hadn't wanted to see Cyrilius or any of the others harmed, or that she had tried to make sure that they would be spared.
You have been listening to Broken Enchantments, written and read by Elizabeth Wheatley. Don't forget to check out my Patreon for early access to episodes, bonus content, and lots of patrons-only freebies. You can learn more at elizabethwheatley.com. And don't forget to subscribe on your favorite podcast platform or YouTube. I'll see you next time.